Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Insights from Icehouse. This is a webinar from POSH-SANT as we aim to build the understanding around cultural, economic, spiritual, and of course, medical dimensions of health and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. POSH-SANT have developed this webinar series to continue constructive and deep conversations about health leadership and to draw out insights from a broad range of people about what health leadership is all about. My name is Richard Fijo. I'm a Larrakia man from Darwin, from my father, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather. I'm also Wurrumungu from Tennant Creek on my mother's side. And today I am absolutely awestruck to be able to introduce our special guest for today, a man who was born in Walkup in New South Wales coast and started his musical career playing bagpipes at the age of 6 before going on to found Icehouse, who had a world tour, releasing 28 platinum records and 30 top 40 singles. And you can probably tell I'm really nervous about Iva today because I'm just such a huge fan. So Iva, thank you for joining us. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Absolute pleasure, and please relax, and I'll try to do the same. Yeah, well, you mentioned born in Wauchope, but that's on the New South Wales northern coast, and my father was a forester, and so that job led him to lots of places. I guess he did his training down on the Murray River, on just inside the New South Wales border, in fact, and he was actually camped in that forest of Murray River red gums for 2 years, basically studying them as a kind of cadet forester. And the nearest, I guess you'd call it almost a village, was a little place called Mathower, and he used to go into that town to get his supplies, and he was there for such a long time. He joined the local cricket team and all that stuff. But he actually met my mother at a charity function that was, everybody kind of pitched in, and whoever in the town, the little town of Mathower, who could do something and perform, got on the stage, and he got up and he sang. And on the same stage, my mother played a piano solo. It was actually quite an ambitious piece of music by Claude Debussy called Clair de Lune, and they met. And so I had a good start, I guess, with music there somewhere. He got transferred to Wagga Wagga, which is in regional New South Wales. And so I basically grew up, my childhood was in Wagga Wagga, and it was one of those lovely sort of country childhoods where I got to roam everywhere, and we were kind of on the outskirts of Wagga, so about 4 houses from the end of our street there was just not much except farming land and Lake Albert, and a lot of places to go wandering when you're a child. So that's where I grew up. Moved to Sydney. He got transferred to head office when I was about 12, so I guess my high school years were in suburban Sydney. That's about it, really, I guess, in terms of, the original background of me.
So I'm just going to go off script a bit about here. Tell us about your love for music. You started with the bagpipes, and what else did you get into? Is it you across all kind of music, or is there something particular that stands out that you came towards guitar or something like that?
Well, that beginning is the weirdest kind of story, because it's really difficult to explain. So Wagga Wagga, like a lot of country towns, is got one main street, and for whatever reason, we were at some kind of parade. I don't know whether it was an Anzac Day or what it was, but we were in the kind of crowd on that main street, and I heard this distant noise, and it turned out it was the local pipe band warming up, and then they of course marched past in all their brilliant regalia, the kilts and the flying drumsticks and the the pipe major out the front, tossing his what do you call that thing? Staff, whatever.
Yep, staff. Yep.
And I was, according to my father, I was probably 5 or younger, but I was absolutely mesmerised. But it was like a giant animal, this sort of noisy thing that was roaming down the street with the pipes going and the drums, and I begged my parents to learn. Anyway, I was apparently very persistent at it because they took me to the local pipe major, who was a proper Scotsman, and he looked at me and he said, "Well, bring him back in 2 years because his hands are too small even for the smallest practice chanter." That's the thing that you learn how to play the notes on. And I did, and I nagged them for 2 years, and after 2 years they relented, and I went back and I learned how to play the pipes. And I ended up marching with that band, and so that was my lovely kind of country beginning. And it can't be explained. It's I don't know. It's such a primal, to me anyway. It's such a sort of primal sound. The pipes, it really kind of got to my guts somewhere. And in musical terms, I can kind of begin to analyse it because it's not dissimilar to the didge in so much as it's all based around this kind of fundamental drone. And there's something incredibly to me anyway, it's sort of in your bones, that kind of feeling when you hear it. Other people, of course, would disagree with me because pipes is very divisive instrument, and a lot of people hate the idea. But it got to me, and that in turn, in a weird sort of default way, when we moved to Sydney, I joined the local pipe band, but it wasn't really the same deal. And I went to school, my new high school, and the music teacher on the first day asked the class whether anybody played a musical instrument. And when there was a couple of pianists and a trumpeter and a clarinet player, and I put my hand up and said, "Yes, sir, bagpipes." And he was horrified. And he just looked at me and said, I remember the quote very clearly, because he said, "Right. Well, I think you should learn to play something more sociable." And that was the quote. And he said, "My wife is an oboe teacher. We have a spare oboe in the storeroom. Turn up at my house after school on Thursday afternoon," which I did. And I went to my first oboe lesson, not even knowing what an oboe was or what it was meant to sound like. But anyway, apparently I got very good at it. And so that led to a whole classical training. And in parallel, my big brother, who was 8 years older than me, left home to go to London to work. He was a young man at that point, and he left behind his Spanish guitar. And that was the beginning of a whole other kind of adventure, because I taught myself over one school holiday summer how to play the acoustic guitar. And then, of course, we know what all of that ultimately led to. That was my beginning.
Well, as an Aboriginal person, I would just say from your description, it's like it was in your blood, if you mind the pun. But coming up from that environment, I think one of the questions that I've got for you is, Great Southern Land was a massive success, and it's been played since you released it in 1982. I remember I was 11 years old, and it's actually just like changed my world. It's just like listening to this thing. It was just changed the direction of music and the music that was around at that time in that generation. Can you please tell us about a story about how that song came about?
As you can imagine, I've been asked many, 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 many times over the years to talk about Great Southern Land, and it never, and it's never a tiring thing to talk about, but it's still as much of a mystery to me as it is to anybody who's ever heard it. And so it's quite weird to have to talk about it, because I actually can't answer the question kind of economically, as it were, in terms of where did that come from. I can kind of go back and piece together the circumstances and kind of make sense of it, but really, and it sort of goes like this: that the original band went off on first international tour, which was a big moment for us to go off, and we'd had the first album was a big success in Australia, and then that got the attention of the international record companies, and they went after us, and we eventually signed with one, and they said, well, we've done a little search and you can't use the name Flowers anymore because we were originally called Flowers.
Okay.
And somebody else is using that, so you're going to have a new name. And in fact, the international record company was Chrysalis, and they had a kind of internal staff competition to rename us. So I think the most popular name, which thank goodness didn't get used in the end, was Industrial Chili, that we were going to be called Industrial Chili.
Okay, that's something that I didn't know.
And I was only recently reminded of that too, and horrified, because I remember this now. And but I think at some point I said, look, the logical thing is we're only known as Flowers, but we're also known as the name of the first album, which is established in Australia and New Zealand, and the album was called Icehouse. And so I said to them, why don't we call ourselves Icehouse instead? And that was the decision. So we went off on our first international tour, and we worked incredibly hard. In fact, we kind of broke ourselves because when we got back, the band broke up. And so I was kind of left on my own with this prospect of writing the sort of difficult second album. You've got to remember, those songs on that first album, they'd been accumulated over 3 years or so. We'd been playing all the time and just adding one song slowly after the other. And then all of a sudden, there I was on my own, come up with another 10 songs, in a hurry. And I was freaking out. But the other thing that had happened was that in the process of going on that first international tour, we flew from Sydney, I think probably across to Singapore or something like that. But anyway, we went right across the middle of Australia. And I grew up in the country, and so I was not a stranger to the countryside, as it were. So we went over the Blue Mountains, and then we went out over the Western Plains, and all of that was kind of familiar because of my childhood in Wagga and so on. And then we got to something different, which was, just dry creek beds and spinifex and red dirt. And I kind of went, wow. And I was looking out the window of the plane, and eventually I went to sleep. And then I woke up 2 hours later, and I looked out the window, and there it was again. And I just went, what the hell? This is massive, this place, and it was just a real light bulb moment. My head kind of exploded. I just had, previous to that, I'd had no idea of the scale. That was the thing, it was just, this is a massive place, and I looked at it and I went, I wonder whether anybody's ever walked across that before. It's just, there was a whole lot of thoughts that kind of went into that light bulb moment. And then that got I kind of put that away in a compartment, and we went off and we worked and flogged ourselves until, as I say, the band broke up. And I got incredibly homesick, and there I was over the other side of the world. And when I came back, I had this terribly daunting job to do, which was to come up with 10 songs. And the first one that I came up with was Great Southern Land. And, I can put all that together now with hindsight. But at the time, it was completely organic. The only thing I knew for sure at the time was, I'm going to write a song about Australia. What a stupid idea that is, because if it goes wrong, it's going to be really wrong, and I'm just going to get, shot down in flames. I knew that it was a kind of dangerous thing to even think about doing. And really unlike me, because I'm a very conservative sort of person, and I don't take on things that I think are going to get me in trouble. And why would I take that on? but I did, you know, and I treated it with great kind of respect the whole way. I remember, you know, it was a very deliberate, thoughtful process, and I was very careful the whole way. I remember just going, this is really important. Don't get this wrong. Don't get this wrong. Don't get this wrong. All the way through it. It was quite a mystery to me that I took it on, really. That's the main thought that I kind of have taken away from the whole process.
Well, I'd say on behalf of all of Australia, thank you for doing that, because I've traveled throughout the Northern Territory, and it's quite easy to look down and see that red sand and actually appreciate what you're saying about the distance, you know. And it's quite easy to be up there in a plane and look out the window and imagine the song Great Southern Land. You know, there's an absolute pride in hearing what you've created. So again, I'm going to go off script a little bit, but I remember you saying something about where that was filmed, because there was like in the video, Great Southern Land is like red sand and all that. And it was actually not too far out of New South Wales. Can you tell us a bit about that one, how that came about?
You're talking about the original music video for
Yes.
Yes, and that is an absolute template in how to deceive the eye, because that in fact was shot in the heart of Sydney. It was in an area not that far from where I live now, which is a kind of national park, Ku-ring-gai National Park, and within that park, you know, I can't tell you exactly where it is. It'd be interesting for me to find it again, actually. But I, you know, in those days, basically, my whole focus was on the music, and I thought that's my department. You know, I'm taking care of the music. And then somebody said to me, "You have to go off and make a music video," and I went, "Yeah, whatever. You know, I'll do. You know, tell me where to go and how to stand and what to wear and whatever." And I wasn't really. I didn't really take care with it and pay that much attention. So they steered me off to this place, and he said, we're going to this chalk quarry, and it's in the middle of the National Ku-ring-gai Park, and so there it was. It was actually a quarry. It wasn't in the middle of the desert or anywhere like that at all. And I remember turning up, and they had, you know, they referred to this fellow as the goanna wrangler, you know. So we've got a goanna wrangler, and I went, oh yeah, okay, whatever. There's only one shot that I involved myself in, and all day I was hassling the director, and I said, look, I just want one shot. I want to be walking through a whole lot of burning sticks. And in my childhood, bushfire was a big part of my father's job. And so he would disappear every summer. He had a two-way radio in his car. And that was a very unusual thing. So we're talking, you know, the late 60s or whatever, mid 60s. And you could kind of sense the change in his demeanor approaching summer. And then I'd watch him driving, and one part of his eye I knew was on the horizon, and it was looking for smoke. And then he would call in and go, what's happening? And his local forester guys would be going, right, there's a fire at blah, blah, blah. And then he would disappear, and he would go and fight fires. And he'd come back a week later, and he was covered in, you know, ash and whatever. And so there was that, but there was controlled burning as well. And you know, all of that was part of his life. And so I just had this picture in my head, and I wanted this one shot in the music video of just walking through the burning, you know, the burning sticks and whatever. And we got to the end of the day, and we'd finished all the shooting that the director wanted, and we still didn't have that shot. And I went, but what about the shot? I've been hassling you all day. That's the one thing I want. And he was really grumpy, and he said, oh, no. We've got a wrap now. You know, everybody will be on overtime. You know, I can't, no, we can't do that. Anyway, I really hassled, and we got that one shot. And that was the only thing that I wanted in the whole video. And it probably cost, I don't know, double time for the whole crew and whatever. But we got that one shot, and that was, I don't know why that was so important to me. Maybe, I don't know.
It was great visually.
Yeah.
I do have to ask you though, you also mentioned the goanna handler. So when did you first meet Aboriginal people and encounter Aboriginal culture?
The truth of the matter is I didn't really, not until much later in my life. And my first kind of relationships were through the arts. So it's a kind of weird one, because Kim Walker from the Sydney Dance Company, when I wrote my first ballet score for them, he was kind of a star. He was a star on the rising. I remember seeing posters of him on buses, you know, and just going, wow, you know, this is a gorgeous young man. And I wanted him to be the first thing that was seen in the ballet boxes that I wrote for the Sydney Dance Company. And luckily, you know, and it was a collaboration with Graham Murphy, the artistic director. And so anything could have happened, really, because Graham had a tendency to kind of, I wrote a whole script, but he kind of took bits out of it and kind of juggled them all around and moved stuff and whatever. But that first, I've got a picture in my mind of that first scene of boxes and Kim on his own on the stage. That was how the whole ballet opened and whatever. So I went on to have a relationship with him. He ended up, for example, dancing in the music video for Touch the Fire. I don't know whether you're familiar with the song, but that was around about 89 or something. And he was in that. But then 1990, we travelled to Elcho Island.
Yep.
And I went up there with Neil Murray from the Warumpi Band. I don't know whether you...
Yep, Warumpi Band, great local band.
Yeah, and we had to... we went up there to record a Didge player, Jimmy, and it was kind of at the request of this quite famous American producer who wanted to go up and record him where he lived. And that was really my first experience of actually going into an Aboriginal community. And so in the process too, flew in a light plane over Kakadu, which was an amazing...
Yeah, it's a beautiful country.
Incredible. And, you know, low enough to be going over the river and seeing the crocodiles that were basking just get a fright and run into the water and all that stuff. And that was kind of a mind-blowing moment as well. My mind-blowing moments seem to be involved with planes, but anyway, it was a thing. And then later on, I worked with Stephen Page from Bangarra, and Stephen I'd known when he was before Bangarra. He was actually a member of the Sydney Dance Company too, so I had these sort of connections that went back. And then he ended up becoming artistic director of Bangarra. And at a certain point, and I can't even remember the reason why, but we wanted to record a version of Great Southern Land with in language. And Stephen came with me to the studio, and he brought a bunch of guys actually from Bangarra, and I think Jakapura was David, who was referred to at that point, translated some of the lyrics into his language. And that was and then they sang Great Southern Land, that particular version of it with me, which was fantastic. And I remember, you know, Stephen was kind of a bit wide-eyed at that point. I don't think he'd been artistic director for very long, couple of years maybe. And he was still really kind of coming to grips with, I guess, the whole, what's the word I'm looking for? The soul of Bangarra.
Yep. Spirit.
Yeah, the spirit. That's the much better word. Thank you. Yeah, the spirit of Bangarra, and so he was kind of transplanted out of the Sydney Dance Company into this other environment, and I'd known him in both environments, and it was interesting because he was kind of changing and coming to grips with a lot of things that he had missed out on, I guess, when he was young. And I'd love to talk to him now because he's obviously just about to retire from Bangarra. And he's come a very big journey. It'd be, I remember when his son Hunter, you will know from the television now, he's basically a star. He's a very well-known face. And I remember when he was born, and I'd like to sit down with Stephen now and just have a cup of tea and a talk because it's been quite a while.
So I've got two more questions. I'm just taking note of time as well. But what is the importance of music to your health and capacity for expression? What does the music and how does that kind of influence externally around you? What's that been about your experience, like your community, your family, Australia?
Gee, that's a big question.
It is.
That's a really big question. No, I had my son is about to turn 25, and he's about the same age I was when Flowers was starting up, the original band and so on. And he's a guitarist, and so music's a very big thing for him. And we're talking about this actually only a few nights ago, and I said, it's interesting because music is an incredibly powerful thing, and the thing that I kind of like about it, one of the things I like about it is that it doesn't matter how much marketing you put into it, how much you try and shove stuff down people's throats. Some of it, will work. If you kind of get this, song pushed at you enough times, yeah, maybe it'll work. But generally speaking, it's one of the few places left in humanity where you can't make somebody like something. If they don't like that piece of music or that song, then forget it. It doesn't matter how much marketing you put into it, they just don't like that song.
Take it back to the drawing board?
Yeah.
Perhaps,
and vice versa, if you really love some song that everybody's telling you is rubbish and that it's completely unfashionable and, whatever, it doesn't matter. That piece of music is just like, that's my favorite thing. I love that. And I really value that because we're living in an age where so much is dependent on how much people are shoving stuff at you and trying to make you buy it, that I think is this one little sacred place, which is music, which is you can't mess with, it's like you either like it or you don't. And everybody is individual. That's the wonderful thing about it. So, your playlist is going to be like nobody else's playlist. You're just going to have a whole bunch of stuff which is just exactly you.
That is so true.
And I can't think of too many things that are like that. This is why I value music so much. So it's kind of got that element for me, and kind of wrapped up in that is a kind of mental health element as well. So that I actually do it far more now that I'm older than I used to do. So there are certain situations, for example, last night, I can think of any number of nights over the last week, and I'll get to a point where there's stuff on television and I'm watching away and I'm pretty kind of passive with all that stuff. I don't kind of seek out the latest thing on Netflix or whatever. I'll just turn on the ABC, and if there's stuff on that I like, then I'll just go along with it and whatever. And there's stuff that I don't like. And so, last night at a certain point, quite early, I just went, nah, don't like that. And I turned it off and I put on a piece of music, and it might be a piece of Beethoven or whatever. Yeah. And that will be enough for me to kind of go, okay, reset. Let's just calm down here and take a moment and not have the television on and just chill and think about a couple of things that happened during the day and stuff that's going on in my life, and just put them away for a bit and enjoy this perfectly pure moment that Beethoven had in, 17, whatever it was, when he wrote the piece of music. And yeah, it's a kind of mental health thing.
There's something pure about it, isn't there? You find tranquility in your own design, and that's something that's very personally every person.
Mm.
So with that, I've got one more question for you, and this is well, not the big one, but how important is music to the future of Australia and bringing Australians together, particularly seeing when we've just gone through things like Reconciliation Week? And what do you think that means for your impact as Icehouses? Mm.
The beautiful thing about music is that it is kind of every language. And so I just had a flash back then, and I don't know how applicable it is, but we play with William Barton, and I don't know whether you're familiar with his work, but he's primarily, I guess, a didge player, but he's an incredible musician all round. He really surprised me. We were over the other side of the world, and I was with my lead guitarist, and we had a couple of acoustic guitars with us, and then William leaned over and he said, "Can I just borrow that for a second?" And he picked it up and played most amazingly on this acoustic guitar, and I went, "What the hell? You didn't tell me you could do that." Anyway, the thing is, when he plays with us, there's a kind of electricity, and I can't really describe it any other way. It's just like there's a vitality and an energy that's just extraordinary that he brings to introducing this instrument, this ancient instrument, the didgeridoo, to a song like Great Southern Land, for example. And there's an incredible kind of connection, and it's really impossible to describe the kind of energy that I get anyway. I can only speak for myself from that combination of sounds. And this is why I sort of say, music is a language, but it's a universal language. And that's why it's important, because it doesn't matter what your background is or where you come from. It has no boundaries. It has no, there are no divides. There are no walls. It's music. And that's why it's important, because you just throw everything else out and then you just connect with that. And it's an amazing thing. And I feel incredibly lucky that by kind of weird instinct from a very small child, I was receptive to this thing called music, and it led me in this direction. And still, I had the conversation with my son the other day, and I said, I was conscious all the way through, apart from the plastic that went into CDs, I can't see how my job has hurt anybody. I haven't. If I'd been pumping petrol, then maybe I'd have a conscience about that, or whatever. But I can't think of too many downsides to music,
Yeah. And I suppose I actually do have to ask, was that the didgeridoo player that you had on stage in Darwin?
Yes. That's
he was fantastic.
He's electric, isn't he?
Oh, wow. Yes. I was just like, as soon as he started playing the didge, and then he went into the Great Southern Land on the didge, everyone knew what was coming, and everyone just went, it was great.
He's amazing, and he's a really gentle guy, but he's also like an iceberg. He's like that. You only saw the tip of it, really, with him playing didge. We're about to do actually a whole concert series, and it's with him and the Australian Pops Orchestra. So it'll be him and an orchestra. And his mother is an amazing singer, apparently, and I've never heard her sing. And she's going to be a special guest. I'm going to be a special guest. It's going to be pretty amazing, actually. So keep an eye out for that. I think it's starting fairly soon. They haven't given me the final dates yet, but it's starting in July. So that'll be incredible. So that's all his music.
Beautiful. So how do we actually find out more about that? Like if people wanted to look into his music, your music, you got stuff online? Will you be promoting that stuff as well through your websites? Yeah.
Well, if you do a search on William Barton, you'll find
William Barton.
and he's pretty active on social media too. So if you go looking at his Facebook page and all of that stuff, and I'm sorry I don't have the dates quite yet. We're only kind of minutes away from having all the final dates locked in, but I actually don't have the list here. I think the first one is in Hamer Hall in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And that's the end of July, roughly the end of July, but I don't have the list. For some reason, they're still locking in the actual shows. But I'm really looking forward to that because it's a bit of a mystery to me as well. And I'm really looking forward to hearing his mum sing because everywhere he goes, he sort of either takes her or he's kind of constantly in contact with her. And I've gone all this time knowing him and still not heard her sing. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, it'd be lovely, no doubt. One last question for you.
Mm-hmm.
What I might do is I might make a summary of actually two more questions. So one is, firstly, for me, this is a personal question, of course. When are you guys coming back to Darwin? Are you coming back? Are you doing another tour?
Yeah, well, personally, yes, because I hate the cold. And apart from anything else, the weather was just fabulous in Darwin. And I kind of felt much more comfortable there than I have all winter. And it seems to be getting worse as I get old, actually, that, my bones are kind of freezing up. And it's changed too, because we hadn't been to Darwin for a while. No, it's probably about 3 or 4 years ago. I think we played in that amphitheatre. But yeah, so looking for opportunities really. So yeah, the answer to that is yes, we will be back definitely.
Yes.
Definitely. And the other question, the second question was what?
Would you mind singing the first verse of Electric Blue with me? Because don't tell anyone, because like I was saying, it's actually an old sweetheart song.
Yeah. Now, I'd have to remember the lyrics. That'd be an issue because
I've actually got to Google this one because I've got to remember the lyrics too now.
If a boy had a chance with someone like you.
Someone like you, would you break his heart? Let him cry for the moon. Are you hiding somewhere behind those eyes? Woo, you just made my year. Beautiful.
I actually remembered it. There you go.
Yes. Well, now I can say I've sang with you and I can evidence that. So I'm just like, that has made my, I've followed you on Icehouse for generations, for not generation, decades, sorry. But, it's been something, and I'll summarize in saying, it's in this interview, some of the things that I pick up is that, you come from a strong family of musicians, and you've always had that passion and drive in you. And I suppose because of that, you always wanted to get into the music and you did that, and you've used your passion to influence so many other people, and it's been an incredible journey, not only for you traveling internationally with your band, and it's been a good learning journey, but also coming home and having that inspiration through flying over country and riding Great Southern Land. And anyone that's flown over, there's so many Australians out there that have flown over Australia, and it just resonates in our minds and in our hearts, Great Southern Land and the great music of Icehouse. So, I just want you to know from my perspective to you, how amazing it's been having you here today, and how inspirational you guys are, Great Southern Land, Electric Blue, all the hits that you sang and all the songs that you sing in live in concert. So if Icehouse is coming your way, don't miss that show. Go to it, it's been, Iva, an absolute pleasure. And I hope to see you in person when you come to Darwin next.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very much looking forward to that. And thank you so much for all those very, very kind and generous words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll leave it there and signing out until we meet again. Thanks, Bryce.
I look forward to that. That's brilliant.